Everyone thought he was an F-ranked adventurer, but one day, he finds a golden servant card. This card summons an SS-ranked goddess, who helps him rise to be the strongest. Kai, a young man with dreams of gold and glory, sets off to become an adventurer. However, luck seems to have taken an extended vacation without him. Despite 2 years of tireless work, he is stuck on the first floor of the dungeon. Like any other day, Kai heads into the caves and slowly creeps toward a slime on the ground. Rather than drawing a sword or knife, he pulls out insecticide and sprays 2 bottles at the slime until it withers away and dies. Feeling a wave of joy, he congratulates himself on how skillfully he handles slimes these days. Not surprising, considering this is his 999th slime kill since he started this dungeon life. He is determined to make the 1000 slime mark and ventures deeper into the dungeon. Suddenly, he spots a golden slime sitting proudly on a pillar. Excited by his incredible luck in finding such a rare spawn for his 1000th kill, he quickly realizes this one won't go down easily. His first attempt to spray it fails miserably, as the slime hops off the pillar as if laughing at his effort. Unfazed, Kai reaches for a more powerful pesticide spray gun, filled with a heavy-duty slime killer, and successfully takes the slime down. He celebrates his 1000th kill and eagerly checks his stats, expecting a boost. Instead, his level remains as stubbornly unchanged as a statue. He decides to let it slide, hoping to at least score some valuable loot. But instead of the usual items, Kai finds a small golden card with a girl's image on it. Confused at first, it doesn't take long for him to realize it is a rare servant card. Upon checking its details, Kai learns it's a Valkyrie named Sylphie. He tries looking her up on Instagram but finds nothing. Deciding that dungeon crawling research is better left for later, Kai heads for the exit. On his way back, a group of adventurers with fancy armor pass him by, their equipment making Kai green with envy. He wonders if he'll ever have enough money to buy such gear. Reaching the reception, he hands over his slime cores to Hitsugaya, the receptionist, who rewards him with a grand total of 500 yen, barely enough to buy a discount snack. Disappointed, Kai accepts the meager sum. Before leaving, Kai asks Hitsugaya if she knows the value of a rare servant card, particularly one from a divine class. After some thought, Hitsugaya mentions that such a card could easily fetch over 1 billion yen on the market. Shocked but keeping his poker face intact, Kai thanks her and heads toward his locker, putting his stuff away and changing into casual clothes. As he exits the dungeon, which, by the way, is part of a fancy amusement park, Kai notices kids in costume excitedly talking about becoming adventurers when they grow up. Lost in thought about the card, Kai waits for the train. Soon, his 2 friends, Shinji and Hayato, join him. They all board the train together. Kai complains that he's still stuck at level 3 and asks why his friends don't try exploring dungeons. Hayato recalls their ill-fated trip 2 years ago when they ventured to the 2nd floor, only to be thoroughly beaten by a goblin that looked too weak to be dangerous. Since then, Shinji and Hayato have steered clear of dungeons and opted for the park's other attractions instead. Later that evening, Kai returns home, eats dinner with his family, and takes a relaxing bath. Before bed, his mind drifts back to the golden card. Selling it could bring him 1 billion yen, enough for all the armor and video games he could dream of. His train of thought is interrupted when his friend, Haruka, catches up to him and asks where he was last night. Not wanting to spill the truth, Kai lies and says he was at a party with Shinji and Hayato. Unfortunately, his 2 friends appear, and Kai quickly pulls them aside, begging them not to expose his dungeon crawl. They agree, but when Haruka presses them about the party, they throw out absurd stories involving crack hookers and bowling, which don't exactly add up. Haruka realizes something fishy is going on but lets it slide. Kai barely escapes getting caught. The next day at school, Kai asks his friends what they would do if they had a servant card. Both immediately say they'd sell it because of its high value and the fact that servants can only be summoned inside dungeons. Kai weighs his options, but later that day, back in the dungeon, he decides to keep the card for himself. He wants to become one of the strongest adventurers anyone has ever seen. Hiding from the cameras, Kai pulls out the card and calls upon Sylphie, the Valkyrie, to become his servant. The card glows, and a brilliant light bursts from it. The light transforms into a tall woman with wings on her back, looking as majestic as a basketball champion. Before he can blink, the towering woman grabs Kai and disappears with him. Confused, Kai spins around and is surprised to see a small armored figure standing beside him. He wonders if a kid got lost, but the figure introduces herself as Sylphie, his new Valkyrie servant. Kai's hopes of becoming a mighty adventurer seem to crumble like day-old bread as he slumps to the ground, regretting his decision not to sell the card. Pulling himself together, Kai tells Sylphie they need to hunt some slimes. Sylphie immediately senses slimes nearby, and Kai decides to test her abilities. Sylphie leads Kai to the slime, and when he asks her to finish it, she agrees. To his surprise, Sylphie unleashes a devastating lightning attack so powerful that Kai briefly fears the entire cave might collapse. He cautiously approaches Sylphie, checking if she is all right. She blushes, saying she's hungry and needs to eat. Kai recalls that servants feed on mana cores and gives her the slime's mana core. She thanks him and mentions there are more slimes nearby. Kai asks if she's strong enough now, and she nods. Before they proceed, Kai asks if Sylphie can detect only slimes. She informs him that she can sense all kinds of monsters but needs to eat a mana core after each battle. Kai quickly calculates that this arrangement won't make them any money. He then suggests that Sylphie track down the slimes while he handles the killing with his insecticide spray. This method works smoothly as Kai quickly neutralizes each slime, speeding up his progress. After a series of kills, Kai levels up to level 4 and gains a new passive skill called Slime Slayer, which boosts his stats by 50% against slimes. Though initially underwhelmed by the new skill, Sylphie cheers him up, saying any new skill is a victory. Kai smiles, thanks her for the help, and says it's time to head home as it's getting late. Before leaving, Sylphie asks if he will summon her again soon. Kai promises he will, then recalls her to the servant card. On his way back, he stops at the reception to sell the mana cores. Hitsugaya is stunned and says Kai broke the daily slime extermination record by a huge margin. Kai casually brushes it off, claiming he got lucky, and takes his 1,500 yen reward before heading home. Later that night, Kai wonders if he should try tackling the second level of the dungeon. While goblins are definitely scary, Kai feels confident that Sylphie is strong enough to handle them. That night, he dreams of his childhood, remembering a time when he and Haruka sat in front of the TV watching an interview with Haruka's father, a famous adventurer. That memory fills Kai with a sense of awe, renewing his resolve to become an adventurer himself. The next morning, Kai wakes up with fresh determination. Armed with a new sword and shield bought with his earnings, he heads out with Sylphie, ready to conquer the second floor of the dungeon. He is committed to clearing every dungeon in his path and becoming the most famous adventurer in the world. Kai and Sylphie walk into the cave, and after a while, Sylphie notices something is off. She glances at Kai and remarks how pale and shaky he looks. Kai appears terrified of the cave, but he lies to Sylphie, claiming that he's just very excited. The moment Sylphie mentions sensing a goblin nearby, Kai spins around and takes off running. Sylphie, confused, wonders what he's doing. Kai covers up, saying he just remembered some urgent business at home. In the middle of his frantic escape, Kai recalls Haruka's dad from the TV interview. He stops, realizing he can't give up on his dreams so easily. With a newfound determination, he grabs his wooden sword and tells Sylphie to lead the way. They soon find a goblin snoozing behind a giant rock, but Kai's fear keeps him frozen. He asks if Sylphie could handle it, and she readily agrees. She begins chanting a spell just as the goblin wakes up, ready for battle. Before Sylphie can finish her spell, Kai jumps in between them with his sword, declaring he's changed his mind. He tells Sylphie to be on standby and then rushes at the goblin. His first strike misses as the goblin dodges. The goblin retaliates, charging at Kai, but Kai manages to block with his shield just in time. They struggle for a moment, but Kai pushes the goblin back, sending it crashing to the ground. Kai immediately tries to finish the goblin, charging with his sword, but the goblin blocks the attack, grabs the sword, and disarms him. As the goblin leaps to finish Kai off, Kai falls back and remembers he still has his trusty spray cans. He quickly sprays the goblin's eyes, blinding it. With the goblin stumbling around, Kai grabs his sword, but as he runs toward the goblin to deliver the final blow, he trips over a rock and accidentally stabs the goblin in the chest. Somehow, this kills the goblin. Sylphie beams with happiness, congratulating Kai, but he's too shaken up to celebrate. He grabs the mana crystal, relieved to be alive. Suddenly, a golden glow surrounds him, and he realizes he's leveled up again. Checking his stats, Kai finds that he has a new skill called Goblin Slayer. Though it seems like a mediocre skill, he decides that a skill is a skill and moves on. They continue deeper into the cave when another goblin attacks. Sylphie uses a defensive barrier to block the assault while Kai times his sword strike perfectly, killing the goblin. Kai then takes down his third goblin by spraying it in the eyes, blinding it before finishing the job. Sylphie then drags him to a new foe. This time, Kai finishes the goblin with a clean sword strike to the head, and he levels up to 6 in the process. As they walk, Kai asks if Sylphie knows anything about the dungeons. She says she doesn't, and that her only purpose is to assist her master. Moving further inside, they find their final goblin of the day. The goblin rushes at Kai, but Sylphie uses her lightning magic to wipe it out instantly. Kai feeds her the mana crystal, and they head back out. At the dungeon's reception, Kai hands over the mana crystals to Hitsugaya. He again claims his success was just a fluke and heads home. Once he's back in bed, his body feels so sore that he can't move. The next morning, he drags himself to school, walking alongside Haruka, who immediately suspects Kai went to the dungeon. Kai denies it and lies, saying he was bodybuilding at the gym, which is why he's sore. Haruka lets it go. In class, Kai tells Shinji and Hayato about his new adventures in the level 2 dungeons, including his 4 goblin kills. His friends are shocked, having trouble believing him, but Kai insists he's telling the truth. He claims he's going deeper into the dungeons after school. After school, Kai returns to the dungeon with Sylphie. Together, they continue exploring, killing goblins with teamwork, Sylphie blocking attacks and Kai landing killing blows. Whenever Kai gets tired, Sylphie finishes the monsters with her lightning magic. After another successful run, Kai sleeps like a log that night, and decides to upgrade to a metal rod the next day. With his new weapon, he inflicts more damage on the goblins, though he ends up sleeping through class due to exhaustion. Still, his daily dungeon runs continue. Kai kills goblins every day, gaining skills, levels, and mana crystals until he reaches level 10. This milestone grants him a special skill called Divine Love, which boosts his stat growth at every level, based on the affection of his divine servant. Overjoyed, Kai decides to tell Sylphie how happy he is to be adventuring with her. Sylphie, completely oblivious to Kai's manipulative side, thanks him, saying she loves working with him. As they continue, they encounter a glowing skeleton, a monster they've never seen before. Kai warns Sylphie to stay alert, and she immediately deploys a magic barrier. The skeleton slams into the barrier, trying to break through. Kai attempts an attack, but his weapons are too weak for this rare spawn. He asks Sylphie to handle it, and she chants her spell, shooting a lightning bolt at the skeleton, killing it instantly. The mana crystal it drops is bright red. Kai wonders if it's rare, but feeds it to Sylphie anyway. She comments on how delicious it was, more than usual. Later, when Kai asks Hitsugaya about the mana crystal, she informs him that it's a rare drop, worth over 2 million yen. Kai is crushed to learn that Sylphie had eaten his chance at becoming a millionaire. Hitsugaya reassures him that if he found it once, he'll likely find it again. That night, Kai reflects on the missed opportunity but is pleased with his level gains. He wonders if he's ready to tackle the 3rd floor, knowing that monsters there come in groups and are much more dangerous. The next day, Kai tells Sylphie he wants her to watch from the sidelines for a while. Sylphie gets scared, thinking she did something wrong, but Kai explains that he wants to get stronger without relying on her too much. While they discuss this, a goblin ambushes them. Kai confidently tells Sylphie to watch, but his plan backfires as he gets injured badly. Forced to buy potions from Hitsugaya, he loses all his savings. That night, he realizes he needs more mana crystals for Sylphie and better gear for himself, so he decides to go back to square one. Kai returns to the 1st floor to kill slimes, gaining skills, levels, and mana crystals. After several grueling days, Kai finally collects enough to move on to the 3rd floor. Before leaving, Sylphie mentions sensing a different type of slime. Sure enough, they spot a silver slime nearby. Kai jumps into action, spraying at the slime, but it dodges. Thankfully, Sylphie is ready and uses her lightning magic to finish it off. To their surprise, the slime drops another servant card, an incredibly lucky find. Kai picks it up and sees that it's a demon rank card for a servant named Lyceria. Sylphie looks visibly upset, and Kai realizes demons and goddesses must not get along. Despite this, Kai follows his own desires and summons the demon servant right there. A huge red flame envelopes them, and from the fire emerges a demon lady. She flies straight through Kai in her ethereal form, much like Sylphie did before. When the flames die down, another small figure with bat wings and horns stands before him. Realizing his party now consists of both a demon and a goddess, Kai feels unstoppable. The demon introduces herself as the demon Viscount Luceria, asking if Kai was the one who summoned her. Kai, disappointed that she can't transform into a grown woman, falls to his knees in disappointment, longing for a demon mommy. Nonetheless, he introduces himself, and Luceria immediately starts trash-talking him, finding him weak and unreliable. Kai is completely shocked by this as Sylphie hides behind him, using a meek voice to tell Luceria she shouldn't talk to her master like that. Luceria brushes it off, saying demons have sharp tongues and not to take her word seriously. This makes Sylphie feel better as she introduces herself to the little demon. Luceria inspects her from every angle, instantly recognizing her as a goddess-class servant. After that, she turns to Kai and demands food, saying she's hungry. Kai asks how she could be hungry when she hasn't even done anything yet. Just then, Sylphie senses a slime nearby and informs them of its presence. They hide behind a rock to see if it's a regular slime, but Luceria isn't as cautious, walking out confidently and summoning a trident. She creates a fireball and shoots it at the slime, causing a huge explosion, while Kai and Sylphie watch in awe. Kai walks over and feeds Luceria a mana crystal, but she immediately demands another. Kai tells her he doesn't have any more, which annoys Luceria, calling him a cheapskate. Kai tells her to show him another skill, and promises her a mana crystal as a reward. Luceria sighs but soon spots a goblin running toward her. She uses her decay magic, completely destroying the goblin as it begins rotting and collapsing to the ground with a sickening plop. Both Kai and Sylphie feel sick. Kai feeds Luceria another mana crystal, which she enjoys, and immediately wants to go deeper to hunt more monsters. Kai stops her, asking if she knows anything about the dungeon. Luceria admits she has no idea about this world. He explains that from the 3rd level, monsters begin attacking in groups, and they'll need better equipment to deal with that. She doesn't seem to care much and still wants to go deeper, but Kai convinces her they'll explore the next level tomorrow. Though not keen on waiting, she agrees not to venture deeper that day. The next morning, they enter the 3rd level, which frightens Kai, but he's confident in his servants and has bought a new crossbow. Sylphie compliments the crossbow, saying it looks nice, and Kai is pleased, boasting it was expensive. Suddenly, they hear a growl and see 2 hellhounds nearby, searching for prey. Kai decides to take the first shot from cover, but the bolt misses, and the hounds charge at full speed. He tries to reload the crossbow, but it's too late, the hounds are almost on him. Thankfully, Sylphie creates a barrier to block the attack, while Luceria emerges with her flaming trident and blasts the hounds to pieces. Kai feeds her another mana crystal, but she immediately asks for more. Kai tells her to wait, saying he can't feed her all his crystals. As they venture deeper into the cave, they encounter demonic boars charging at full speed. Luceria, ready as always, flicks her trident and blows most of the boars up, but one dodges the attack and runs through the fire. Luceria prepares another attack, but Kai tells her he'll handle it. He takes aim and this time, hits the boar in one eye, blinding it. But this isn't enough to stop the demonic boar, which charges at Kai, seeking revenge. Kai reloads but trips, falling to the floor. Just before the boar can attack, Kai manages to fire another shot, hitting the boar in the head and killing it instantly, just inches away from him. Sylphie praises him for his first kill on this floor and for leveling up to 11, while Luceria mocks him for falling over, and demands more mana crystals. After leaving the dungeon, they overhear girls talking about how they reached the 6th level by forming a party instead of going solo, which makes Kai wonder if he'd grow faster with a party too. The next day at school, Kai ponders this as they return to the dungeon. Luceria, in full force, uses her fire blast to demolish every monster in her path, while Sylphie shows off her lightning magic to stun a demonic boar to death. Not wanting to be outdone, Luceria immediately uses her decay spell, killing 2 rat monsters, which once again makes both Kai and Sylphie sick. They collect their rewards, while Luceria, predictably, asks for more food. They keep slaying more monsters, gathering mana crystals and coins, though Kai notices Sylphie seems off. When he asks if something's wrong, she changes the topic by claiming she saw more hellhounds nearby. That evening, at home, Kai wonders if Sylphie is avoiding him. He worries that because Sylphie is a goddess and Luceria is a demon, they might not get along and could eventually clash, using their godly powers against each other. The thought terrifies him, and he's unable to sleep. The next morning, Haruka notices Kai's tired face and asks if he got any sleep. She suggests that if he's worried about something, maybe she can help. This touches Kai, and he decides to use his friends as an example, saying Shinji has two female friends, one sweet and one harsh, and he's worried they might fight. Haruka asks if the girls said they don't like each other, and when Kai says no, she suggests he talk to them directly. Later that day, Kai summons Sylphie alone in the dungeon. Sylphie looks around, confused about where Lysiria is. Kai explains he didn't summon her because he wanted a private talk. Sylphie looks flustered but asks what he wants to discuss. Kai gets straight to the point, asking if she dislikes Lysiria. Sylphie surprises him by saying no, she doesn't dislike Lysiria. At first, she found her intimidating, but after Lysiria told her not to take her seriously, they became friends, and she now likes her a lot. Kai then asks if anything else is bothering her. She denies it, but Kai persists, telling her she's important to him. This makes Sylphie emotional, and she admits she feels Kai is treating Lysiria better than her. She says before Lysiria came, he talked to her a lot more, but now, he mostly talks to Lysiria. Kai, realizing his mistake, promises to treat her equally and talk to her more. Later, Kai proves his promise by giving both Lysiria and Sylphie double mana crystals, and praising Sylphie for her quick thinking. Lysiria protests, claiming he hasn't praised her like that, so Kai compliments her for her strong spell. They continue their journey, with Sylphie defeating more hell monsters. She levels up. Both Kai and Lysiria congratulate her, and Kai asks Sylphie to test her new strength. Sylphie uses her lightning spell to take out a group of hounds. However, while celebrating, Kai senses something and orders Sylphie to raise her shield. A demonic boar emerges from the dust and attacks the shield, but it's too strong for the boar. Lysiria gets ready to finish it off, but Kai says he wants to handle it. He shoots the boar in the head, killing it instantly. Afterward, he feeds Sylphie more mana cores as her appetite has grown along with her level. It starts to worry him, as he can barely sell any. Deciding to collect more cores, they return to the level 1 dungeons, which surprises Hitsugaya when Kai comes to sell the cores. She suggests Kai could take on level 4 dungeons. That night, Kai checks online for better equipment but finds everything too expensive. The next day, back in the level 1 caves, they spot a rare slime. Kai tells Lysiria and Sylphie not to let it escape. They surround the slime and obliterate it with their spells, leaving behind a magic crystal. Kai, excited, picks it up and uses it, gaining the magical skill called Water Strike. Kai makes up his mind to test his new water magic in the level 3 dungeons. Upon entering, he spots a pack of hounds and quickly tells Sylphie to raise a barrier while instructing Lysiria to be ready to strike if his attack proves unsuccessful. As the hounds charge, Kai stands his ground and releases a water blast, but much to his shock, the attack barely phases the hounds. The creatures simply shake off the water and continue their charge. Luckily, Lysiria steps in and finishes them off with her fire magic. Sylphie tries to comfort Kai by reminding him that using magic at all is an achievement, but despite her encouragement, Kai feels disheartened. He heads home, determined to find a way to improve his control over his magic and effectively use it to defeat monsters. The next morning, Kai returns to the dungeon with a renewed resolve to practice his water ball spell. He tries casting it at the dungeon wall, but it barely leaves a mark, only wetting the surface. Even after casting the spell once, Kai is already exhausted. Nonetheless, he pushes through and keeps practicing. The second attempt goes a little better as he speeds up the water ball's launch, and both he and Sylphie are pleased with the improvement, although Lysiria remains unimpressed. After just 2 successful attempts, Kai collapses from fatigue and heads back home, where he falls asleep as soon as he lies down. In his dream, he recalls watching Haruka's dad on television as a child, which had ignited his dream of becoming an adventurer like him. Spurred on by the dream, Kai revisits the dungeon the following day. His water magic has improved considerably as he is able to cast it faster. He spends the entire day shooting water balls at the dungeon walls, taking brief rests in between. This time, he attempts to change the shape of his water ball, successfully turning it into a cube. Thrilled by the progress, he keeps experimenting, molding the water into various shapes until he eventually collapses from exhaustion once again. As he leaves the dungeon, Kai stumbles and falls into the arms of a female adventurer. Embarrassed, he quickly apologizes and assures her that he's fine before hurrying off, but she and her teammates seem impressed by his determination and hard work. Later, in class, Kai dozes off, and when the teacher wakes him, he blurts out something about training, causing the entire class to burst into laughter. During break, his friends approach and ask him about what kind of training he was talking about earlier. Just then, Haruka arrives and asks if he's preparing for the dungeon, but Kai awkwardly changes the topic, claiming he was referring to dance practice. Relieved, Haruka advises him not to overwork himself, and asks him to show her his dance moves one day, leaving Kai feeling a little embarrassed. The next day, Kai ventures into the dungeon once more, this time using his water ball in an actual fight. He launches the spell at a goblin, but instead of the water bursting, it forms a solid shape, blocking the goblin's airways and choking it to death. Sylphie and Luceria both compliment him on the improvement, but Kai soon realizes that he's no longer gaining experience from the monsters on the 3rd floor. This means it's time to proceed to the 4th floor. Feeling that he needs to be better prepared for the more challenging monsters ahead, Kai invests in high-end equipment. He buys a sleek bodysuit made from carbon nanotubes, which offers excellent protection while being lightweight and flexible. Sylphie praises the new look, but Luceria mocks him for appearing ridiculous in it. Kai defends his choice, explaining that the suit is both durable and expensive, boasting protection against arrows and other physical attacks. He also buys a magic output amplifying bracelet, which enhances the power of his spells, but Luceria is quickly bored by the showcase of new gear and drags Sylphie away. When they finally reach the 4th floor, Sylphie detects an approaching monster. Before Kai can check the monster encyclopedia for details, a giant cockroach emerges from the shadows, sending both Sylphie and Luceria into a panic. The girls frantically hurl spells at the creature while sprinting through the dungeon, and Kai finds himself chasing after them, fearful of being left behind. After the battle, Sylphie clings to Kai, admitting that she was terrified, while Luceria, staying true to her tsundere personality, pretends to be unfazed by the encounter. Sylphie then apologizes for abandoning Kai during the chaos, but he reassures her, stating that their rampage allowed them to clear the 4th floor quickly. Luceria, however, refuses to eat the mana crystals from the insect monsters, though her hunger eventually forces her to eat them, much to her disgust. With extra time on their hands, Kai suggests they scout the 5th floor. As they explore, Sylphie senses both a sand monster and a mud monster nearby. Kai attempts to shoot the sand monster with his crossbow, but his first arrow misses, and the second simply passes through the creature without dealing any damage. The sand monster retaliates, and Kai calls out for Sylphie, who erects a barrier just in time to block the attack. Realizing that the monsters are immune to physical strikes, Kai asks Luceria to handle them, and she swiftly destroys both monsters with her fire magic. Despite the victory, neither Sylphie nor Luceria are willing to eat the foul-tasting crystals from these creatures. As they venture further into the dungeon, Sylphie spots something unusual on a wall. Kai can't see anything special, but Sylphie decides to blast the wall with her lightning magic, revealing a secret passage. They proceed cautiously, with Kai warning them about traps. Just as he finishes his warning, Luceria steps on a trap, triggering an arrow that hits Kai instead. Fortunately, his bodysuit absorbs the impact, sparing him from serious injury. The group continues, but Luceria sets off yet another trap, this time shocking Kai with electricity. Strangely, instead of feeling hurt, Kai feels energized by the shock. Soon, they come upon a large gate adorned with a painting. Sylphie senses a powerful presence behind it. Kai suggests retreating, but the girls insist on pressing forward. The gate won't open, so Sylphie uses her lightning magic to force it open. Inside, they find two formidable boss monsters waiting for them, a massive red ogre and a giant slime. Kai, determined not to back down after coming so far, commands his teammates to focus on defeating the red ogre first. Sylphie and Luceria immediately unleash their lightning and fire magic at the ogre, but it becomes clear that the creature is immune to skill-based damage, as it remains virtually unharmed. The red ogre suddenly lunges at them, but thankfully, Sylphie's barrier blocks the attack just in time. Kai quickly tells Luceria to handle the giant slime while he tries to take down the ogre using his crossbow. Each arrow he fires steadily reduces the ogre's health, but soon, he runs out of arrows, leaving him with no ranged attacks. Meanwhile, the enraged ogre begins to fiercely pound on Sylphie's barrier, and Luceria is struggling to deal with the slime all on her own. Realizing they are in a tough spot, Kai decides to take a risk and rely on his water ball spell. He conjures up a water ball, but due to the effects of his magic bracelet, it freezes into an ice ball. Without hesitation, he shoots the frozen water ball at the red ogre, which manages to chip away at its defense. However, Kai quickly realizes that his mana reserves are running low. To maximize his remaining energy, he decides to reshape his ice balls into sharp icicles, which prove to be much more effective. With his last 3 shots, he manages to deal enough damage to bring the Red Ogre down. Now, with the Red Ogre defeated, only the slime remains. The slime launches an attack at Luceria, but Kai bravely steps in, using his shield to block the blow. As he holds the slime back, he calls out to Sylphie, asking her to prepare her Divine Spear attack. However, as the battle drags on, Kai's shield and equipment begin to melt from the slime's corrosive body. Just as things seem dire, Sylphie charges forward and strikes the slime with her Divine Spear, piercing through the creature, but the attack barely makes a dent in its health. Kai feels the urge to give up, but recalling his hero from childhood, he gathers his resolve and presses forward. Realizing that the slime is still vulnerable despite its size, Kai pulls out his trusty bug spray. Even though the monster is enormous, it is still just a slime, so the bug spray is highly effective. As Kai continues to spray the creature, its health gradually diminishes. Sylphie stands by his side, reinforcing her magical barrier to protect him. After exhausting his first 2 bottles of bug spray, Kai retrieves 2 extra strength cans from his bag and unleashes them on the slime. Finally, its health reaches 0, and the massive creature collapses, defeated. The girls cheer in celebration and eagerly hug Kai, but in their excitement, they accidentally hurt his injured shoulder. He quickly drinks a healing potion to fix it. Shortly afterward, Luceria levels up, and Kai checks his own stats, pleasantly surprised to find that he has also gained several levels from the battle. Without wasting any time, Kai begins gathering the loot from the battle. He collects the Red Ogre's core, which he knows will fetch a high price. As he searches for the slime's core, he instead stumbles upon a rare-grade magic sword. To his amusement, the sword looks more like a steak knife than a traditional magic weapon. Later, Kai brings the Red Ogre's core to Hitsugaya, who is curious about how he managed to acquire it. Kai tells her the story of discovering the hidden dungeon on the 5th floor and defeating the boss monsters there. Hitsugaya is impressed and tells Kai that the Red Ogre core is worth a significant amount of money, which makes him very happy. She then shares even more good news with Kai, inviting him to join an event next week where a group will attempt to clear the 7th floor of the dungeon together. The following week, Kai arrives at the event and runs into the 3 girls he had met earlier. The leader introduces herself as Ari, while the pink-haired cat girl is named Miku, and the last one is Hikari. Kai introduces himself as well and wonders if the 3 girls will end up joining his party for the event. The story will be continued in future videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.